and then perfect. And then maybe I'll pass it to Gail to do a quick introduction. And everyone, thanks for joining. If you can just quickly introduce yourself in the chat, so Tessa also gets a sense of where you're calling in from, that'd be wonderful. And yeah, Gail, on to you.
Yeah, not only where you're calling from, but maybe just a few lines about what your passion is, what you're working on, what fills your heart in terms of serving the world, which I'm sure has many, many elements to it. Tessa, I've been thinking, how do I introduce Tessa? How do I introduce Tessa? Oh my gosh. I mean, when we have these monthly convenings and our wonderful friends and guest speakers show up, I kind of have a sense of, okay, I'm going to start with this and start with that. And then I just see you as such an abundant, big, beautiful, golden apple person that I don't even know where to start, right? And I just have to say, first of all, it's just wonderful that you're here, and your smile and your energy and your experience is going to be quite motivating and quite informative and inspiring to the little big believers that are here. And I'm so grateful that we can record this, because then later we take some of your tidbits and your tools and your quotes, and we put them in a transcript, and then we can share it with the wider community. So thank you for that. Tessa, I guess one thing I thought of this morning was just how, in terms of the world in the past few years, and in mental health in particular, things have felt for many of us to be backwards and upside down, and trying to make a world right for ourselves around mental health, but just in general around physical health and community health. And I have always loved your inclination, let's say, to look at mental health, but to look at it from a positive standpoint. And so I have to just say that when I look at the name Asset Education, I always think Tessa. And I'm not sure if any of the people here, understand that asset is your name backwards. And that's taking this idea of turning things backwards, looking at things from a different perspective, disrupting and being very positive about it. So I guess I wanted to first just start by saying, tell us how you came up with the name for Asset Education. And does it still really, really ring true for what your values are?
That's such a great question, and it's so timely, Gail. First off, thank you, Avi and Gail, for having me. I love what Little Big Fun does, and I love having conversations like this, because I think as someone who got to participate in a lot of conversations like this, it's been exponential to assets growth and where we are today. So I really, really value what you two do and bring to the world. So thank you. Assets name actually just came from my high school principal. When I was applying to different programs and trying to figure out what would I call this, my high school principal, Mr. Quirk, he knew that asset was Tessa spelled backwards, and he had suggested that. And I just was yeah, of course, let's do that. We're actually changing our name though. So we are changing our name to Upstream Education, which for many reasons, but at its core, we feel upstream better represents what we do now. And we think of upstream as, being more proactive, right? Doing more preventative work, which is what we do. And we often, as asset education, would get confused with financial services. When people would be like, what are you doing? Is it financial education? And we'd be like, no. So we're changing to upstream. And I'm still getting used to how do I describe why we went upstream, but essentially in essence, we're Gail said, we're trying to be more positive around mental health and more proactive around it instead of reactive. And we think upstream is a better way to articulate that.
Wow, yes, it does. And I how timely. I had no idea. So this is kind of we're the first people to hear about this news.
That's I'm trying it out with y'all.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more now about, the growth of it from the time that you were talking to your principal and looking at a topic for your educational thesis, right?
Mhm.
And then moving that thesis about the importance of providing mental health support to teachers and students, making it so that the lens of mental health is as important as academic health, right, for students, and giving teachers tools to help their students. Then you're now in like 8 states, right? And you went from like 200 students and teachers that you were impacting to almost 38,000 students over the course of about 6 years or so. And so what has remained a real constant in that growth that you feel you're taking the new into this iteration of upstream? What's the most constant of all of that growth?
Yeah, so the most constant would be like the core of what we do, right? Like our niche is we provide 5 to 10 minute lessons, and each lesson provides a concrete tool to help reduce stress and anxiety and strengthen resilience. So throughout all of our iterations, we've always focused on we want to provide 5 to 10 minute lessons that can be easily incorporated into academic classes that are non-burdensome to teachers and can make a mental health conversation more inclusive in our schools, right? That at the core, it was always that. It was always short amounts of time, easy for teachers to do, and ultimately like navigating the stigma or decreasing the stigma. So that's always stayed the same. In terms of like how I got to that, I can provide some context if that's helpful, Gail and Abby.
Yeah.
But I grew up having really severe anxiety in school since I was 8. I would have panic attacks. And whenever I'd have a panic attack, my teacher was always the first responder. But they clearly didn't know what to do. They would get overwhelmed. They'd hand me a stress ball. I found that to be infuriating because I'm like, squeezing this isn't making this feeling of anxiety go away. And sometimes I'd get sent to the principal's office because my teachers didn't know what to do and perceived my anxiety as a behavior problem. And it wasn't until I got a full scholarship to a private high school that I learned concrete tools to reduce my anxiety. I learned different strategies for when my heart started to race or when my breath started to be out of control. And I knew those warning signs of, oh, when I get sweaty palms in my math class, I know that if I like hold my finger and take a deep breath, and I do that for all 10 fingers, that I'm calming my nervous system down. And when towards the end of my high school career, I recognized the inequity in my education experience. I've been really blessed to get a full scholarship to a private school that really taught these tools and incorporated mental health into the conversation of everyday academics. But I believed all students like deserve to learn these strategies. So ASSET really stemmed from the question of like, what would it look like if we equipped teachers with these tools? And how do we do that in a way that's non-burdensome to them? And I think those like questions just like have guided everything we do. And just like always coming back to those questions.
I love that. Always coming back to that initial idea, that initial sort of format, right? Initial idea and those questions. Abby, I'll let you ask a question now. I could keep going, but I'm going to take the pause.
No, Gail and I will take turns asking questions. And something that you just talked about, which is something that I've always loved about how you work, Tessa, is you simplify really kind of things that are oftentimes complicated or harder to understand, and you boil it down to like what I think you often use the words bite-sized materials or like bite-sized. And so something that I loved looking at the website were these tools called like Tessa's Toolbox or something that you have. And there's some like wonderful activities. And I was initially thinking about this question of like, could you help explain how ASSET like does these workshops and like how you actually train teachers? But then I was wondering if it might actually be helpful for us. And I know we're a small enough group to like try out one of those toolkits, because I imagine that a lot of people might actually benefit from that. So if you feel comfortable, Tessa, maybe one of the toolbox items, maybe you could do a 5-minute activity with us, and that might help people understand what kind of activities you're oftentimes doing.
I love that, Abby. Yeah, I can absolutely do that. So what Asset, soon to be Upstream, does at our core, we provide teachers with a curriculum of bite-sized tools, as Abby said. What that means is we have 96 lessons. In each lesson, students are learning a concrete stress or anxiety reducing tool based on the practices of mindfulness, positive psychology, or positive self-talk. What we deliver to teachers, or we deliver to schools, is we have an online platform where teachers log in and they get to see all 96 lessons. Each lesson has like a lesson plan. So it's like everything you need to say, how much time it's going to take, any additional like tips we might have, like here's how you can make the lesson more your own. And then in addition to that lesson plan, we have a presentation so that if they're teaching the lesson and they want to have more visuals for their students, because they know that connects, that their students like having visuals, we like offer that as well. So that's like what we're delivering to staff. Like we believe that schools are the best distribution point, because we know that students spend a large part of their day there. That's why we chose like that avenue. We also chose that because we wanted to, like Gail said earlier, kind of flip this conversation of mental health on its head and not keep it separate of like outside of school. We know students are in school. We know that's where they're experiencing a lot of stress and anxiety. We also know school is a safe space for many students. They receive a lot of services at school. So that was why we targeted them. Then what we do, in addition to just like, we don't just give people like, hey, these lessons, good luck. We actually train them. And so in our trainings, we lead school staff through all of the lessons. We have the opportunity for them to experience the tools as students do and ask us questions. And then throughout the academic year, we provide additional supports. So we send weekly email reminders to teachers, because teachers at the beginning of Asset wouldn't always like implement the lessons with fidelity. And I'd ask them, I was like, why, like, this is supposed to be so easy. Like, why aren't you doing this? And they'd like, honestly, it just gets like, other things come first and I just forget. And then this like one particular teacher was like, if you sent me an email with the lesson, I would do it. And I was like, I can do that. And so we just started doing that for everyone, and teachers love it because they're like, I don't have to log into like this platform if I don't want to. It comes into my inbox. And that was a great lesson, right? Like, instead of being frustrated by like, I was frustrated, I'm not gonna lie. Why are you like not using the lesson? I asked them why. Like, what is this barrier that I thought wouldn't be a barrier? Because we tried to make it as easy as possible. And it was like literally like appearing in the inbox made it much easier for folks to do. So we send weekly email reminders. We check in with a point person at each school every month, and that's to troubleshoot, like if they're having any like challenges implementing, or if we learned something from another school, like the school like used the program in this way and it saw really great results. We think this is relevant for your school too. And then the last thing we've been doing is we've been offering virtual wellness sessions for school staff and families, because unintentionally, Asset has had these ripple effects, where by teachers teaching these tools, it actually supports their own mental health. And we have some data to back that up. And we also have been seeing students teaching their families these strategies. And so we're trying to create like a more cohesive offering of, here's another way like those people in students' lives can engage with our work. So that's kind of what we offer, and schools actually pay for that. So we actually, though we are a nonprofit, schools are paying for that program. And so it's $2,500 a school. We do have a lot of schools that we offset that cost through grants. So we have a wait list for schools that cannot afford to pay for the program. And a large part of my job is making sure that if a school cannot afford to pay, that does not stop us from providing programming. Like, if it was up to me, I'd give it away for free to everyone, but we can't do that. So that's a large part of my job, is making sure that schools who are really hungry and ripe for this work are always able to have access despite their financial abilities. So I think that answered part of Avi's question, I hope. And then the second part, so I'm going to share a strategy that I actually really like to do before meetings, particularly when I'm meeting with a funder, or just a school, like something just that feels like very heavy. And I'm like, oh, that, like I put so much weight on this, one meeting. I'm like, this will make or break it. But when I put that amount of pressure on myself, I know I don't always show up as my best self. So the strategy that I really love to do is called finger breathing. We joke with students, we call it sneaky mindfulness because you can practice it, before a meeting, and no one really has to know you're calming yourself down. But for those that may not be familiar, mindfulness is the practice of, paying attention to an anchor on purpose and without judgment. And that anchor might be your breath. That anchor might be the sounds around you. That anchor might be just like the visuals around you. And another mindfulness teacher, the other way he put it that I always really appreciate it too is, taking a seat, placing your attention on your breath. And when your mind wanders, bringing your attention back to your breath. It's pretty simple. But to practice finger breathing, I like to place both feet on the floor because that just makes me feel a little more grounded. And then we can take 3 collective breaths, and then we'll practice this tool itself. So I invite you to close your eyes or place your gaze on the floor, whatever feels most comfortable for you. And we'll just begin with a collective 3 deep breaths. So take a really big inhale through your nose. Feel your chest rise and your belly expand. Pause at the top. Exhale, notice your belly deflate. Twice more, just like that. Take a really big inhale through your nose. Pause. Exhale, soften your body. One more, just like that. See if you can take the biggest inhale of your day. Pause at the top. Now see if you can take the biggest exhale of your day. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes and place your attention on your hands. So take a hold of your left thumb. Take a really big inhale through your nose. Pause at the top. Exhale, let it all go. Now take a hold of your right thumb. Take a big inhale through your nose. Pause. Exhale, see if you can soften your shoulders. Now take a hold of your left pointer finger. Take an inhale through your nose. Feel your chest rise and your belly expand. Pause. Exhale, notice your belly deflate. Now take a hold of your right pointer finger. Take a big inhale. Pause. Take a big exhale. Now take a hold of your left middle finger. Take an inhale through your nose. Pause. Take an exhale out your mouth. Now take a hold of your right middle finger. Take a big inhale. Pause. Exhale. See if you can soften your body just a bit. Now take a hold of your left ring finger. Take a big inhale. Pause at the top. Exhale, let it all go. Now take a hold of your right ring finger. Take a big inhale. Pause at the top. Exhale, soften your body. Now take a hold of your left pinky finger. Take an inhale. Pause at the top. Take a really big exhale. Last but not least, take hold of your right pinky finger. Take that really big inhale. Pause at the top. Exhale, let it all go. And just take a moment here to release your hands and check in. Notice how you're feeling. Why we like that strategy is because research has found it takes us 7 deep breaths to calm the nervous system. And by holding all 10 fingers, you're taking 10 deep breaths. So you're inherently getting those 7. And it's just a really beautiful strategy when you need to prepare yourself before a meeting or get centered. So yeah, that is finger breathing. I hope that was helpful. But what we like to say at Asset, not every tool is for everyone, but there's something out there for everyone. So we have more strategies on our website, like Avi was saying, if you want to explore more.
Thank you so much, Tessa. I can feel already. I mean, I think just like the daily nerves, right? Wednesday, you're either starting your day or ending your day. And just like 5 minutes of just doing this is beautiful. And I was also kind of like, when I was preparing for this, thinking of like my school times and growing up. And I think a lot of the experiences that you've shared where you're just constantly anxious, constantly under stress, and having 5 minutes of this at the beginning of class. I can see how the students, I've watched some of the asset videos where students talk about how they look forward to this like specific class because that's where asset happens for them. And I can see why it's such a valuable process. So thanks for running it through with us. And yeah, Gail, I'll pass it to you. Next question.
Yes, that was very calming. Thank you. Oh, well, let's see. I'm going to just switch here a little bit and ask a question related to growth strategies for the organization. And we have many of the little big believers are emerging, right? They're starting their initiatives. And we talk about the power of, little steps, much like in alignment with, little tools with little bites. And I know that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but for Asset, early on, you had some opportunities, some recognition, right? And you had the connection with a woman who did some research for you early on, and then also a connection with an Imaginarium design lab, I think design lab, or something. I'm sorry if I'm not.
You got it right. You got it right. Imaginarium, I think it's Innovation Lab. I think that's what it's called.
Imaginarium Innovation Lab. And those are things that brought you like a catalyst, right? Like some and recognition and some impact. And so early on in the stage of development of Asset, help us understand the balance between going after that early recognition and uplift and, partnerships, and also not getting that and having the resilience to keep trying. And how pivotal were those early, connections, and did they work always in a really good way for Asset, or I think you get what I'm getting
I do, and I love this question, Gail. I really, really appreciate it. So Gail alluded to this. My senior year at Watson, where I did my undergrad, we were writing our thesis on what's your idea that you want to use to change the world. And my idea was Asset, but I had taught the tools myself in a local high school in Boulder, where I live. And what I found was I didn't really know the students very well. I met them once a week, and it was harder to build relationships. And I was like, this is not really scalable if I'm the person going in and teaching finger breathing like we did right now. Like, I'm only one person. I can only do so much. So I serendipitously had, presented this idea of like, I want students to learn these tools in schools. And two teachers heard about it because I was presenting at a Watson Summit, and two teachers were in the audience, and they said, we think you should come to our school. And so my senior year at Watson, literally what I did, I typed in like a Google Doc, like, here are the tools that I like use, here's how I say them. And I gave them to like two US history teachers. And I would just like sit in the back of the class and talk to students after they learned the tools. And I'd be like, what did you like about that tool? What didn't you like? What would you change? That's what I did for like an entire year. Would just be like, sit, listen from students, talk to the teachers too. Like, how hard was that? How easy was that? And so I was collecting that information myself and putting that into my thesis. And then at the same time was open to different opportunities. I wasn't actively looking to like pitch competitions. Someone had recommended that I submit my idea to a pitch competition, which was by the Imaginarium Innovation Lab, which was run out of Denver Public Schools. Funny enough, I did not initially get into the competition. Somebody dropped out and they called me. So originally I got like a letter that was like, no, you're not in this, you can't like pitch. And I was really upset, but I was like, okay, it's fine. And then like a few weeks later they called me and they're like, someone dropped out, do you want to do it? And I was like, yes, I want to do it. And so I pitched based on what I had been doing at this one school, what I've been learning. And it was like a really emotional time for me. My high school principal had just died, who like really inspired Assets work. And I remember like pitching and then just crying after. Like, I just sat in the audience and cried because it was so emotional for me, like to like be like living out this dream that he was so part of, and then he wasn't there to like see it. And I ended up winning that competition. Like, I wasn't supposed to be in it. I was kind of an afterthought, but I won it. And it was $9,000. And I think one of the things that I think Gail taught me, because Gail was teaching, what Little Big Fun does today at Watson. And I could have probably like previously my brain would have been like, how can you make this $9,000 as big as I possibly can, right? And instead, what I did was like, let's just focus on 10 teachers with this money. Like, let's just pay these 10 teachers to implement the curriculum and learn from them. Like, we're going to just do that for another year. We're not going to make it like bigger. We're just going to like focus and learn. And so that's what we did. And we were lucky that, like Gail said, as part of that pitch competition, they gave me a research partner. I didn't have to pay for a research partner. And that was really instrumental for our work, because schools like data, they like knowing something worked and that it's quantifiable, which drives me crazy. I'm like, students are saying it's working for them, but schools need to have like some data behind it. So having a research partner who could be a neutral third party and say like, hey, it did work. Students have taken these scales. We're seeing that it's reducing their stress. So that was really beautiful. The other thing that was really great about that time was I was able to build really meaningful relationships with those teachers, which was really catalytic to how we grew, right? Like, treating everyone as part of my team. Like, those teachers had so much value and so much insight that I just didn't have. I wasn't a classroom teacher. And so I really treated them as equal partners in this work. And I think by doing that, that helped them advocate to their school principals, like, hey, like, we should be doing this more in our schools. And then that was really catalytic. So instead of because I could have gone like, let's do this in like 10 high schools instead of 10 classrooms. But we chose the classrooms because we weren't ready to be in 10 high schools, and that was humbling, right? It was humbling to like take a step back and be like, no, we can just do like a few classrooms right now, and that's okay. And I think that can be hard when fundraising, because you want to like show funders like we're making all this change and it's like, look how big we are. And instead it was really beautiful to say like, here's what we're learning. And I think people respected that approach of like, this is what we're learning right now. This is how we're making changes based on what we're learning. And then including the teachers in that process actually helped us grow to their schools, because they felt comfortable advocating to their principal, like, hey, I think we should be doing this more. And so that has been catalytic to how we work today. It's like, it's all about relationships and making people feel part of our team and that their voice matters. And it's all about learning, right? Like, we have this curriculum, it's great, but it's become great because we've always asked, how can we make it better? And like really welcomed feedback. I don't know if that answers your question, Gail, but yeah, that's like the little pieces that were important.
Yes, totally answers the question. And I'm hearing this theme of, balancing going for it and then also stepping back and learning from it. And I really appreciate that that you're modeling, how if you share with a funder the learning that you're doing, not necessarily the failures, right? But we're stumbling here, or we're learning this, and this we need you to recognize that we're not perfect. We're not a Bill Gates yet, or any of that. I think it's very realistic and practical, and can lead to positive growth. And I think that the asset and what you just talked about really exemplifies that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. A question, and this is kind of connected to that, but related to sales. So you went from like this 9,000, 10 teachers, I believe, where you're paying teachers to implement it, to now where people, like schools pay $2,500 and you're getting like a wait list of people that are saying we would like to adapt it. When you were selling and the first time you were trying to get a client, what was that experience? And like, for a lot of nonprofits, and we talk a lot about this here, sales is like the scariest thing. Fundraising too, but sales is such a scary thing. Do you remember the first sale you made, and like what was like effective in that sale?
Yeah, it's changed for me now, but I used to find principals to be terrifying, because that's who's like, paying for it, right? It's coming out of their budget. And we used to charge like $10,000. I'm like, oh my God, why did we charge $10,000? But we did, like in the early days, because we didn't, now we charge $2,500. So put it in context, like we pricing has been a challenge for us. And I think it's been a journey to find the right price point. That being said, I was, what's the right word to describe it? I don't have a master's in education, so I felt really uncomfortable asking a principal to pay for something. I knew it was of immense value because of my personal education, and I knew it was a game changer for my own life. And our data was starting to show that in other high school students, but it was still really early on. So I felt pretty terrified. What helped a lot was in that meeting, I remember the principal, it was Scott, who's the principal of North High School, just like one of the largest high schools in Denver. I had that first asset teacher, one of the first ones, Beth, in the room with me. And that was immensely helpful. To be like, here's someone who this service, this program has deeply impacted. Like, she believes in this work. So it felt like I wasn't going into that meeting alone. I also came prepared with data. And the thing that I made the mistake in the early days, I would just like talk to people instead of asking questions in that sales meeting. So now when I take a sales meeting, it's very different. For example, I met with the assistant superintendent like a couple days ago at the school district. And I asked them, like, what are your SEL needs? What social emotional learning, that's SEL. what curriculum have you used in the past? Like, what are the needs of your students? What data are you seeing? And so those questions help me build my sales case. So they might say, we're really looking for curriculum of high school for high school students. We really don't have a lot of time. Like, a barrier for implementation is time. And I used to just tell people all about asset and what I thought they wanted to hear. And now I listen to understand, okay, these are the things that matter to you, and I'm going to connect what asset does to what matters to you. And that's helped us a lot. So that's kind of been a change. And then the other beautiful thing is that because we had that research partner early on, and I highly recommend finding a grad student. Like, we've done that in the past. Like, you can find a grad student who will write their thesis on the work you're doing for free. Like, they're looking for that. So I think research is really important, because in that sales component, having data to back up, like, this isn't just some like program that I thought was a good idea. Like, we really have data behind us. So that has helped immensely in that sales conversation. So in summary, I would say ask questions to understand what your prospective customer needs and is looking for. And that informs what you share about the work you're doing. And then you can draw those connections. And then if you have data, that usually like really helps close the sale for us, is like that. And then the other thing we always do after every sales meeting is we send them a sample pack of our lessons. So like, here's 5 lessons so you can feel it out. We send them our pricing document, like, so here's like the pricing. And we'll send them some of our data. Like, we have like impact reports that are like 2 pages, and they have like a high level overview of our data, and it's punchy and pretty. So we send that to folks, and then we just follow up really diligently, because schools can be like really slow. Like, there are some sales that it's taken me like 2 to 3 years, like a private school we're working with just this year. It's taken me 3 years to get them, but I really, really wanted to get them. And so I just worked, like, I politely followed up every like 3 to 6 months for like 3 years. And so, yeah, I would say that's the other thing, is like, a sales no is not always a no. You can always ask, like, can I come back? Like, can we, come back to this conversation a year from now? And so that's been really helpful too, of like being diligent in the follow-up, I think, is where people lose opportunities if you're not diligent. And I think being like politely persistent goes a long way.
Great answer. And I love the idea of finding a graduate student, as a third party to bring a new set of eyes to the work, to the programming, to the curriculum, to the tools, do some research and data. I think that that's really just a brilliant idea. And it can apply to any sector, really.
Right.
It's education, or it's, road development, farming. I wanted to ask you a question about, many of the Little Big Believers, some who are here and others, are in countries where the whole educational system is quite different, right? It's like, if you're in East Africa, for example, the little that I have been able to learn is that there's still a lot of talking to, there's still a lot of didactic approaches. There's not very much of alternative learning styles brought in. And teachers may not even in their education get training about the role of mental health. However, mental health is still very, very big there. And so for some of those who are here or who may read the transcript later, if you took asset and you put it into an ecosystem that was really quite different than the United States educational system, right? But you wanted to, in your work, if you're interested in health overall for your community, what kind of advice what would you do if you took asset to a country where the whole ideology and practice of education is not as relationship based, right?
That's such a beautiful question, Gail. And I think this is where my initial thought goes. I think I would ask questions. So instead of being like, this has worked really well for the United States in this setting, like I don't know how it would work in this new community. So I think I would ask questions around like what matters to them, right? Like what matters to them. And so maybe like that question might be like, we really want to have really good test scores to make sure students get into college, right? Like that might be like what matters, or we want to make sure they get good jobs. And so this is why we do this. And then what we've found, like research, not research we've done, but research that's been done about like how stress management and self-regulation as a skill set actually helps students' abilities to learn, right? So then I might kind of bring it back of like, okay, so here's some research we've been seeing that when we give students these skill sets, they do better on tests, right? They perform better in academics. And so that might be how I would start that conversation of what matters to you. How does that like connect to the research we've seen of increasing test scores, for example? And then I would ask teachers to maybe give it a try. Like instead of being like, you have to implement this program, I would probably make it more invitational and say like, here's the lesson plan. Like, what do you like about this? What don't you like? How might you change it for your students and your culture? And then just have them try it out, because I think how we've gotten a lot of success is people trying it and making it optional and invitational and making it their own. And I'm not saying that's probably the right answer. I would probably have to do more thinking around it, but that's kind of probably initially how I would start.
I think that's great. I think that that makes a lot of sense, because it's about needs assessment, right? It's about meeting the community, and it's in some cases it's about meeting first, right? The powers that be, right? And asking them what their goals are. And I do believe that the tools that you offer and the mission is applicable today everywhere in the world. And
thank you.
And if there's I really appreciate that you rose to that question, because what you have is a curiosity that's driven by the absolute interdependence between enjoying your job and feeling good about yourself, enjoying living in your community and service, and having good mental health. And all of that is that interdependence of mental health and thriving in the world just couldn't even be more and more relevant to us today, especially after the pandemic and what we see is happening in the world. So thank you for sharing that initial step that some people could take if they want to introduce the bigger, if they really want to have a blowhorn for mental health, right?
Yeah, I think asking questions, and I do think, like you said, Gail, people are more open to having conversations about mental health. Like it's just like less of a barrier for us, even in general. Like I would say 6 years ago, people weren't too concerned in schools about students' mental health. Like it just wasn't. It wasn't as visible. The pandemic really shined a light on how much we have to go in that department.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we wanted, especially at the last part of this, we always want to make some space, because as you can see, Gail and we're going to ask you a lot of questions. We can talk to you for a couple more hours, I think. But we do want to be mindful of the time, and I think other questions that folks have. So I think there's 7 other people here. So if you want to ask a question to Tessa about asset or the kind of feedback or ideas that she has shared, feel free to just turn on your microphone and jump in.
I have a question. Hi, I'm Munal. I'm from Nepal, and I actually work in the field of education in Nepal. So a lot of things that you were saying, I could connect with a lot of them. And so I work in this social enterprise called Canopy Nepal, and we one of the things that we focus on is promoting interactive learning in schools in Nepal. So it's very rote learning system here in schools, where students don't really get an opportunity to interact with what they're learning or their teachers with a very one-way of teaching, and it has been going on since forever. So we're here to sort of break that and introduce interactive learning. And we go bottom up. So we work with students and we focus less on the teachers. And we've been learning for about 5 years now. And in Canopy, we collaborate with this NGO based in New York. And we have a program called Beyond Borders. So I manage that program. So I've also worked with schools based in the US and schools based in Nepal. And one of the biggest challenges I think we've been facing is what you mentioned about showing schools that the work that you're doing really is creating an impact in the student. But the debate comes between the outcomes and the output that we see, right? Like schools would rather look at the output. They rather want tangible things, but you can't always show the tangible things, especially when it comes to learning, because a lot of it comes from the student's qualities or the interests or like the little things that you see. And that's like the biggest challenge that we have as well, because there's only so much that we can see tangibly to sell our programs per se in schools. So like, how did you manage to find the right balance between the outcomes, which is the tangible outcomes, the data that you talked about, and the output, and the outcomes of the program? Because always, again, datas don't always sell, but stories also don't always sell. I feel like you have to have like a good balance for that. And we have been trying a few models, but it's still very difficult, especially to convince schools in Nepal, because what we're doing is, and we work in public schools, so government schools are like, they just have like the basic requirements of what a school needs to have. So I don't know, how did you find the right balance in that?
That's a really beautiful question. And I think how we found the balance, so to speak, is one, having that research partner was key. So finding a grad student or someone who can be a thought partner, because to be honest, I wouldn't know what to measure. Like, just based on my own education, my own experience, I wouldn't know what those like outcomes like to ask for, or scales or anything. Like I wouldn't really know. But the other thing I would do in conjunction with that I wish I did earlier is also ask the schools, like, what do you want to see? Like, what data matters to you? Like, what are the outcomes that you're looking for? And then seeing if there's kind of any overlap from what the research partner says and what the schools say, because then that can align really beautifully. Or, sometimes we do this with our research partner too, and we'll say, hey, schools are telling us they really care about this and want to see this. Is there any way we can measure that or connect that? So that's another way, like, I think about that in our own component. And I think like the other thing is knowing, I love that you're doing bottom up, by the way. I think I am all for that. I think it's more effective and more sustainable. I would say the other thing we've done is trying to know different school principals or school leaders or teachers that are pivotal in those communities. I think, what we do here a lot is we'll buy them coffee or a meal, and just have a conversation with them to understand what they care about and to unpack that more. Our teachers in the US are underpaid for the amount of work they do. So buying them a meal and just having a conversation goes a long way and helps kind of determine those data points for us. And what I meant to say, connecting off of that, I try to find is it a principal that really cares about student stories? Or is it a principal that really cares about the outcomes? What do they care about? More so than just the system itself. Who is the decision? What does the decision maker care about? Yeah, thank you, Gail, for asking that. Canopy Nepal, that's awesome. Does that answer your question, Monel? Or is there anything else you want me to expand upon?
Yeah, I have a follow-up concern to that. So when you're working, so especially for you, because you work with so many schools, right? And with your programs, although you could alter it according to the school's need, you have a set way that you run your programs and a set outcome that comes out of it and a set output, right? So for example, you obviously want to be on the same wavelength with the school so that it's easier to work with them. So I think another challenge comes where how far do you waver away from what you're doing so that you match the school's wants and the needs, or like when do you know like, okay, this school is not going to work out, but if you again see a really big need in the school, how do you, as somebody that works in the field of education, let go of it knowing that they have a need? I feel like it's such a personal dilemma versus like your
I love
work
that question.
ethics and everything. I don't know.
I really love that you named that because it's such a beautiful question. And it's true, it happens a lot, where we've had schools that we haven't continued working with. And it's been frustrating because we know like we made a good impact or we did our best. But I've also been like, how I've justified it or like rationalized it in my heart is like, right now I'm going to continue working with the schools that are ready to do this work and are ripe for it. And I've seen that the more we focus on those schools and highlight them as models, right? Because like a lot of things that educators do, at least in the United States, schools do, is they look at other schools. Like they very much so care about what other people are doing. And they care about how their colleagues, what they're doing, and if they're talking about it. And so I think what we've done well is just focus on the schools that are doing it well and have them talk about it. And that's gotten more people on board. So for example, in Denver Public Schools, though my first grant came from Denver Public Schools, they didn't really pay attention to me very much. They didn't pay for the program from the district. Though the Imaginarium was supportive, they were not. But this past academic year, we reached such a critical mass in Denver Public Schools that the district started to want to talk to us because so many schools were doing the program. And that only happened because we had school principals, for example, the principal of South High School, Bobby Thomas, he would just talk about us to his colleagues. And so I think the more, it's not always about you changing the ones that aren't willing to like get on board. It's focusing on the people that love the work, that believe in it, that see the impact, and getting them to talk about it to their colleagues. I think that's how we shift in education systems that are slow. They're going to care about what other people are doing. And if they're having better results or they're seeing a better impact with their students, they're going to want that rather than like, particularly for me too, as an outsider, I could say that till I'm blue in the face, but until they see it from somebody else, would they like get on board? So that's how I focus on it. But it is hard, especially when you're like, I know this is really good for these students and I'm really frustrated that you don't see that. It's emotionally hard. But I've just had to like put my attention onto like the people that are doing it well and support them to the best of my ability and then help them amplify their voice however I can, whether that's like a video, making a video with them or whatnot. That was a great question.
Thanks so much. That's all.
Thank you so much for these questions, Moral. Anyone else has any more questions? I think we could do one more question. So if anyone else has a question. I think you've answered it all. Gail, you were going to say something.
Well, we just have it's just, I wish we had more time. This always happens.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you so much for your spontaneity and for your enthusiasm and for your skill and your experience and just the energy that you bring and your passion. And it's so needed, this work that you're doing, this awareness that you're building. It fills my heart to know that it's so here. And I guess lastly, just want to say, if you have any words of wisdom about how, when that individual passion that you uphold and that you hold within and that you live and sleep and dream of, how do you balance also taking care of yourself and,
That's a great question.
having a little bit of balance also for your personal life as a founder of a growing, thriving, important organization?
I love that question, Gail. It's a journey. I would say I've learned that taking walks in the morning before I start my day, like, is really, really helpful. Like, I just do like a 30 or 40-minute walk, because I find that like I could hole up inside and just be on my laptop working all day, and that's not great for my own mental health and well-being. So going on walks just the first thing in the morning, like I make a tea and then I just walk. And that's been really, really helpful for me. So like spending time outside during the work day, not just like waiting till the weekend, protecting my weekends. So making sure I have 2 days that I'm not on my email. My team knows not to text me or email me, or they know if they email me, I'm not going to respond. So like protecting time where I'm not working, and you know, my boyfriend knows like Friday night I'm usually like I am just like on the couch. I'm like, I can't think anymore. Like I am done. And it takes me like Saturday to come back to life. And then like by Sunday, I'm like, okay, I'm like restored. So in summary, I would say protect your time, make time for yourself, get outside or do things that you enjoy doing that's not related to your work. Like I really love reading fiction. So like making time for me to just read fiction. And then the other thing that I find really helpful, though it is work related, is just work with people you really enjoy working with. Like focus on finding like really awesome people to work with. I like this morning I went for a walk with our grant writer and strategy person, and I love working with her. And so I think just making sure that during the day you're also surrounded by people that lift you up, and that you just like really love not being alone in the work. And you know, it could just be a friend that you tell like, here's what I'm struggling with, another little big believer. Like it doesn't have to be like a big team, but just like finding people you enjoy like working with or collaborating with. That's been really big for my mental health too.
Yay, yay. Thank you so much. I'm really, really grateful for your presence. And I too love to take walks, and I'm actually going to go for a walk right now.
Beautiful.
And also with a dog. So that will be
I
nice.
love that.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And I think if anyone has any other questions, they can either reach out to you or they can reach out to us, and we can make a connection if it works, and check out her website. And I'm just so happy that you are here. Thank you for being with us, Tessa. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you so much,
Thank you for
Tessa.
including
Thanks a
me.
lot.
Okay.
Such an honor having you. Thank you so much. And everyone, we hope you have a fantastic month ahead. We'll see you in August for another interesting convening. And in the meantime, we'll share around this video over the next couple of weeks. So thank you so much, Tessa, and everyone have a great week ahead.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.